I was holding papers that didn't weigh more than a slice of mail. Yet they pressed against my ribs like a seatbelt in a crash. The deed, the house my son, Malik Carter, bought, sat in my palm like a polite little lie. I flipped through every page as if a miracle might be hiding in the margins. My thumb smudging the bold type where my name did not appear. Not even once. 51 years since my first paycheck. And I could tell you the exact feel of a signature line, smooth. Hopeful. Dangerous. This one felt like goodbye. From the bedroom down the hall, door cracked like a guilty grin, I heard Malik on speaker. Tanya's voice carried through clean and bright. The way a check sounds when it clears. Baby, it's official. Our house. He laughed, that sweet, reckless laugh that once floated my whole life. Yeah, Mama will be so happy, for Ms. Bernice to have the room with the garden view. Ms. Bernice, Tanya's mother, her room, my money. The arithmetic did itself, fast and unfriendly. People say mothers are built for endurance. I am, but not for being told, without being told, that I'm extra furniture. 6 months earlier, Malik had sat at my small Atlanta kitchen table with eyes soft as Sunday bread. Just $20,000 for the down payment. Mama, 2 years and I'll pay you back. And you'll always have a place with us. I wrote that sentence in my blue notebook. You'll always have a place with us. I circled it like an usher saving my seat. Now Tanya, kind as a budgeting app, reminded him, we already agreed your mom keeps her apartment. She needs her peace. Peace, apparently, is what you give people when you don't want to give them a room. Rain stitched down the window in gray threads. Hemming in the afternoon. 25 years in a beige office chair had taught me how to swallow feelings while highlighting someone else's schedule. I had budgeted everything, coupons, bus routes, the number of Sundays I'd get to hear my grandson mispronounce spaghetti. I did not budget being escorted out of a dream I paid for. Malik wandered into my kitchen smiling. Kissed my forehead like a stamp on unwanted mail. New chapter. Mama. For him. For Tanya. For the kids, and for Ms. Bernice. Who would be meeting the sunrise from a bed my $20,000 helped buy. The family portrait was complete. With me photoshopped out. The edges blurred so I wouldn't notice. I set the deed in the drawer with my prescriptions and my measuring spoons. Something inside me cooled with the steadiness welders have when the sparks fly. Grief and I had danced before. This felt different. This felt like picking up a pen labeled policy. I made tea and poured it too carefully. The way you handle old china or new boundaries. Malik leaned against the counter, tapping out a silent beat with a confidence I recognized as borrowed. It's all set, he said. We'll move next week. Settle in. Then bring you by after we tidy up. Bring me by, like a visiting inspector. I tasted the words and felt the tiny scrape of disrespect on my tongue. I swallowed anyway. I have experience in swallowing what should be said. Sounds nice, I replied, my voice the temperature of a closed window. Tanya's laughter drifted from the phone, bright, efficient, already arranging where the couch would go and where Ms. Bernice's slippers would live by the door. I could see it without seeing it, the room with the garden view. The curtains I'd imagined choosing. The sunlight I had prepaid. My blue notebook waited on the counter. Spine cracked from years of grocery math. I slid it toward me with one finger. Slow as a tide. On the top line I wrote, transfers from Evelyn Carter to Malik Carter. The number that would come next didn't know it was about to make me a different woman. The kettle popped. Malik pocketed his phone. You okay, Mama? I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised on coupons and casseroles. The man who could lift a sofa but not a boundary, and I told him a truth I'd never said aloud. I will be. He blinked. I smiled a small, unnegotiable smile. When he left, the apartment felt larger, like I'd moved a couch I didn't need anymore. I opened the drawer, slid the deed beside the warranties and the winter receipts, and shut it on purpose. Then I wrote a second line beneath the ledger title in tidy capital letters, effective immediately. The Bank of Evelyn is closed. Tomorrow, before Malik could ask for one more little thing, I would do the biggest thing I'd done in years, walk into a bank with my spine straight. My voice steady, and my future in my own name. The morning arrived with the smell of coffee that felt stronger than courage. Though I needed both, I pulled my blue notebook toward me. The one that carried decades of figures, groceries, gas, birthdays celebrated on a budget. Today I gave it a new chapter, transfers from Evelyn Carter to Malik Carter. The pen slid across the page like a confession. $2 for the used car he said would last a decade but coughed its lungs out in two. $800 for the transmission, just to patch up. Mama, $10 for uniforms, supplies, and a shiny laptop that somehow belonged more to Tanya than the kids. $700 for Tanya's crown at the dentist, how fitting. I thought later, crowns do make queens. $3 to keep their credit card wolves from the door. A stream of $500 here. $300 there, each number heavy with memory. Then the largest figure, $20. The down payment for the house where my seat at the table had already been auctioned off. I added the totals, $48,300. My chest rose and fell as if the number itself pressed against my lungs. Out loud I said it, just to hear it, 48,300. The syllables tasted like metal. The phone trilled, vibrating against the table. Malik's name lit the screen. I stared at it the way you watch a storm gather outside the window. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Hey, Mama," he began, voice as casual as weather. "Listen, the move's turning out more expensive than we planned. We're short about $3. Just for the movers, some paint, a few things. $3,000, always, just, always urgent, always tomorrow. When do I get to see the house?" I asked, steady but quiet. The pause stretched too long. Long enough to show me the truth. "It's messy right now," he said finally. "We'll bring you once it's ready. You don't want to see it all torn up, do you? And when do I move in?" The question leapt out before I could tuck it back in. Another silence, this one thicker, elbowing its way into the room. "Mama, Tanya and I think maybe it's better for you to stay in your apartment for now. Kids need stability. Tanya's job is new, and, well, we'll reassess later." Reassess. That word was a velvet curtain covering a brick wall. "I'll think about it," I said flatly. "But Mama, we need the money by tomorrow. The movers want half up front." I said I'll think about it. I ended the call, thumb pressing harder than necessary. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full. Brimming with resolve. For the first time in years. My hand did not shake as I reached for the phone again, this time to dial the bank. "National Bank, how may I help you?" "Yes," I said, voice sharp with clarity. "I need to remove my son as an authorized beneficiary. Cancel the debit card in his name. And please send me information about updating my will." The clerk's voice carried no judgment, only efficiency. "Certainly, Ms. Carter. We'll process that immediately." When I hung up, I spread real butter, thick, golden, expensive, on my toast. I'd been saving it for Christmas. Today was better. By noon, I would be standing at the bank with my head high, opening an account Malik would never touch, because from this day on, every dollar would buy back my freedom. Banks, I've learned, smell like paper and pens chained to desks. Maybe it's the scent of other people's secrets, savings, debts, promises that couldn't be kept. I walked in just after 10, shoulders straighter than usual, like I'd pressed them with starch. The clerk behind the counter wore a navy suit that said professional, but her smile said I've seen this story before. "I'd like to open a separate savings account," I told her, completely apart from my current one. "Transfer $10,000 into it today. And I'd like the statements sent to a post office box." She typed quickly, her nails clicking like castanets. "Of course, Ms. Carter. Do you also want a new debit card tied only to this account?" "Yes," I said. The word tasted clean, like cool water after a storm. When she handed me the card, still warm from the printer, I slid it into my wallet next to the church photo of my grandson. Micah. He was missing his front tooth and grinning like joy was his birthright. I whispered to the picture, "Don't worry, baby. Grandma's finally learning how to build a fence around her garden." At noon I sat across from Attorney Sinclair, a man whose silver hair matched the stack of legal pads on his desk. His office smelled faintly of leather and lemon polish. He leaned forward, hands folded. "What brings you in today, Ms. Carter?" "I want to change my will," I said. My voice didn't crack, though my heart tried to. "Yes, Malik is still my son. And he'll get a portion. But the rest? I want it to go to charities that protect women like me, women who gave too much and got erased for it. He scribbled notes. We can certainly do that. And if you'd like, we can add conditions to your son's inheritance. For example, that he only receives it if he fulfills certain obligations to you, visits, medical care, genuine involvement in your life. The suggestion stung like salt on a wound. To think respect had to be written into law. Still, I nodded slowly. Draft something. Let me see it. By the time I left his office, my watch said nearly 2. My stomach growled like it was finally tired of self-denial. Normally, I'd have gone home and made a turkey sandwich. But something inside me whispered, not today. So I ducked into a diner on Peachtree Street and ordered pan-seared salmon with vegetables and a glass of white wine. $35. A week ago, I would have called it reckless. Today it was survival. Each bite tasted like I was signing a treaty with myself. At 3:15 my phone buzzed with Malik's text, Mama, I'm coming over at 4. We need to talk. I set the phone down beside my empty glass. Exhaled, and for the first time in years felt curiosity instead of dread. I would not scream. I decided. People confuse noise with power. Not me. My strength would be measured in policy, not pitch. At 4 o'clock sharp, Malik's knock would rattle my door, but this time, he wouldn't be meeting the mother he thought he knew, he'd be meeting the woman I had finally decided to become. The knock came exactly at 4. Heavy and entitled, like someone who expected the door to open before the sound even finished echoing. I rose from my chair slowly, smoothed my skirt, and reminded myself, this is my apartment, my rules, my life. When I opened the door, Malik stood there with Tanya half a step behind him. His eyes searched my face the way a boy looks for candy in an empty jar. Tanya wore her usual expression, concern balanced carefully on top of calculation. Mama, thank God, Malik said, moving in for a hug. His arms reached for me. But I stepped back. His movement froze, awkward in the space between us. We were so worried when you didn't answer your phone. You weren't worried about me, I said quietly. You were worried about the money. He flinched. Tanya's lips parted like she wanted to defend him. But she stayed silent, clutching her purse strap. I motioned them inside. They sat on the couch as if the cushions might judge them. I remained standing, arms crossed, the blue notebook on the coffee table between us like a witness ready to testify. You've been talking about me, I began, my voice firm. I know about the plan for Ms. Bernice to have the garden view. I know about Tanya's peaceful apartment suggestion for me. And I know I wasn't part of your real family conversation. Malik's face drained of color. Mama, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I leaned forward, tapping the notebook. $48,300. That's what I've given you over the past 5 years. Do you know what that makes me, Malik? His eyes filled, guilt flooding faster than words. Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. It makes me the Bank of Evelyn. And as of yesterday, this bank is closed. No more withdrawals. No more overdrafts. No more loans disguised as emergencies. Tanya finally spoke, her voice careful, polite. We were just trying to protect our routine. Mrs. Carter, we thought maybe you'd be more comfortable staying here. Comfortable? I snapped, the word slicing like glass. Comfortable is what people say when they've decided you're unnecessary. I've lived 69 years and I know the difference. Silence swallowed the room whole. Malik's shoulders sagged. His tears weren't boyish this time, they were heavy. The kind that could rot wood if left unattended. Mama, I don't want to lose you. You already did, I said, steady but not cruel. You lost me when you decided I wasn't part of your family. And you won't win me back with panic now that the money stopped. Malik's next words trembled out of him. Mama, tell me what you need from me, and I realized this was the first time in years he'd asked me for something other than cash. Consistency, I answered, letting the word settle like a stone dropped into still water. Not money, not promises, consistency. I want Sundays that don't get cancelled because someone's tired. I want invitations to birthdays and graduations. Not apologies after the fact. I want honesty before a bill is due. Not when desperation already has its hands around your neck. Malik wiped his face with the heel of his hand. staring at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. Tanya shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between us. And if, one day, I move in with you, I continued, it will be because we planned it together. As family, not because you ran out of other options. He nodded slowly, like a student repeating a hard lesson. Yes, ma'am. As for your movers, I added, almost dryly, if they collapse without my 3,000, then you hired the wrong movers. For the first time in weeks, laughter bubbled out of me. Short, sharp, but real. It startled me, startled Malik, even startled Tanya, who let out a nervous chuckle. The heaviness in the room shifted just an inch, enough to let in a sliver of air. Tanya finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. You're right, Mrs. Carter. We've taken too much for granted. We need to do better. I studied her face. For once, it didn't look calculating, it looked human. Almost contrite. Maybe she meant it, maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my job to sort through their intentions anymore. My job was to protect what I had left, my dignity, my savings, and my peace. Malik leaned forward, clasping his hands. Mama, I love you. I never meant to make you feel unwanted. I put my hand over his for a brief moment, just long enough for the warmth to remind me he was still my child. Still the boy I once carried on my hip. Then I pulled back. I love you too, Malik. That's why I'm drawing the line. Love without boundaries is just an invitation to be used. The silence that followed was heavy, but not suffocating. It was the silence of truths finally spoken. The kind that lingers like smoke after a fire but clears the air for breathing. They stood to leave. Malik hugged me again, different this time. Less entitled, more careful, as though he'd realized hugs weren't automatic withdrawals anymore. Tanya gave a small nod, almost a bow, before slipping out behind him. When the door clicked shut, I leaned against it, letting the weight of their absence sink in. I should have felt empty. Instead, I felt lighter. I crossed the room to the window, pulled the curtain back, and watched the Atlanta sky burn pink with the coming evening. My phone buzzed with a message from Marla. Park at 6? Bring that novel you never finish. I smiled, touched a bit of lipstick to my lips, and slipped my shoes on. For once, the reflection in the mirror showed a woman who looked like she belonged to herself. Tomorrow, I would open my post office box, sign the draft of my new will, and tuck away the first key to a life where I was no longer an afterthought, because the next chapter of Evelyn Carter's story would be written by Evelyn Carter alone. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, the light just beginning to pry through the blinds. For years, my mornings had belonged to someone else, packing Malik's school lunches, ironing his shirts, later answering his calls about rent, car repairs, or some urgent need that always had a deadline of yesterday. But this morning, the air in my apartment was mine. I brewed my coffee slow, inhaling the sharp scent as if it were a sermon, and sat with my blue notebook open like scripture. The first stop on my list was the post office. I walked the 6 blocks there, my steps brisk, my heart strangely light. For $35 a year, I purchased a little brass box with a key that clicked in my hand like freedom. This was where my new bank statements would arrive, hidden from curious eyes, away from Malik's reach. I slipped the key into my purse and felt taller than when I walked in. Next was the lawyer's office. Attorney Sinclair greeted me with that same calm, steady look. He slid a manila folder across the desk. Here's the first draft of your revised will, Ms. Carter. I scanned the lines, each one a shield hammered out of words. Malik still had a share, but reduced, conditional. The rest split between 2 charities Sinclair recommended, one that provided housing for elderly women in crisis, another that offered scholarships to girls whose mothers had been abandoned. As my eyes traced the page, I realized this was the first document in years that reflected my wishes, not someone else's needs. Would you like to sign today? Sinclair asked. Not yet, I said. I want to read it carefully. Sleep on it. I've rushed enough decisions in my life. Not this one. He nodded approvingly. Wise. Take your time. Power is best exercised with patience. By noon, I was back outside. The sun burned brighter, and Atlanta bustled as if unaware that Evelyn Carter had just redrawn the map of her life. I stopped at a cafe, ordered a sandwich I didn't need but wanted, and ate slowly by the window. Couples strolled past. Children tugged at their parents' hands. And I thought, this is what normal looks like. Maybe I can have some of it, too. When I returned home, my phone had already stacked itself with missed calls and texts, Malik's name filling the screen like unpaid bills. I let it buzz. I'd spent too many years answering immediately. Let him wait. Let him wonder. I placed the manila folder from Sinclair on my kitchen table, set my coffee cup beside it, and whispered to myself, this is the start. For the first time in a long time, the words didn't sound like wishful thinking. They sounded like truth. That evening, as I slid the new P.O. box key onto my ring, I realized the real test wasn't about money at all. It was about whether Malik would recognize that his mother had finally changed the locks on her life. That evening, the sky was bruised purple over Atlanta, streetlights humming like tired bees. I sat in my armchair with the manila folder balanced on my knees. Every line of that will seemed to whisper, you are no longer invisible. I traced my finger along the margin, thinking of my grandmother's gold brooch locked away in the safety deposit box. For decades I had planned for it to go to Malik's wife, an heirloom from one mother to another. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe it should pass to my granddaughter one day, if Tanya would even allow it. Or maybe it should be donated to a museum, to remind the world that women like me had stories worth preserving. My phone lit up again, buzzing like a trapped insect. 27 missed calls, most from Malik, a few from Tanya, and one sweet, misguided voicemail from Micah, Grandma. Daddy says you're sick. Are you okay? My chest tightened. Malik had already begun spinning stories, painting me as fragile or unstable just because I dared to close my wallet. That stung worse than the silence. I set the phone face down. For once, his urgency would not dictate my day. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 8 a.m. sharp. Through the peephole, Malik's face looked younger, almost desperate, like the boy who used to beg me for $5 at the corner store. Tanya stood behind him, her arms folded, her lips pressed thin. I opened the door a crack but didn't step aside. Mama, please, Malik began, his voice strained. We need to talk. I can't take this silence. I know we messed up, but we can fix it. Just help us with the move. After that, we'll make it right. The words, after that, hung heavy between us. They always did. After that meant once we get what we want. After that meant your needs can wait. I tightened my grip on the door. No, Malik, there is no after that. Not this time. He blinked as if I'd slapped him. His eyes wet, his mouth opening and closing with words that wouldn't land. Tanya shifted her weight, then tried her calm, reasonable tone. Mrs. Carter, think about the children. They need a stable home. You helping us helps them. The manipulation was so transparent I almost laughed. Helps them, as if my grandson's stability depended not on his parents' responsibility but on my checkbook. I stood taller. My helping them starts with showing them boundaries. They need to see a grandmother who values herself, not one who's used until she has nothing left. Malik swallowed hard. Mama, I can't believe you're saying this. Well, I said, voice steady, believe it, because this is the new language I speak. Malik's hand hovered on the doorframe as if he might push his way in, but I knew the next moment would decide everything. Whether I'd slip back into the mother who always yielded, or stand as the woman who finally chose herself. For a long moment, Malik just stood there, his hand braced on the frame like he could hold the whole world steady if he pushed hard enough. I met his eyes and didn't blink. For years, I had been the one to look away, to soften first, to patch over tension with a smile or a casserole. But that morning, I refused to be the one who flinched. Finally, he dropped his hand, his shoulders sagging. Mama, please, don't shut me out. I know we've taken advantage. But you're all I've got. All you've got? I repeated softly. Malik, you have Tanya, your children, a new house, a new chapter. What you don't have anymore is an open account with my name on it. That's what's changing. Tanya stepped forward, her voice sugar dipped but sharp underneath. Mrs. Carter, it's not fair to punish Malik like this. He's doing his best. I turned my gaze to her, steady as a judge. Fairness, Tanya, is a woman working double shifts to put her son through college. Fairness is 25 years of saving pennies so he'd never have to beg strangers for help. Fairness is giving until there's nothing left. And still being told you're hard to live with. Don't talk to me about fair. She stiffened, her eyes flashing, but she didn't argue. Malik looked down at the floor like a schoolboy caught cheating. You said you loved me. I continued, my voice gentler now. If that's true, then love me enough to learn responsibility. Love me enough to stop asking and start standing on your own 2 feet. Because I won't carry you anymore. He rubbed his temples. Mama, I don't know how to do this without you. My heart ached at that confession. But I held firm. Then it's time you learned. I raised you to be capable. Malik, I didn't raise you to depend on me like a crutch forever. You're a man now. Be one. For a moment, silence filled the hallway. Even the hum of the refrigerator behind me seemed to pause. Malik finally lifted his gaze. Eyes red-rimmed. I'll try. Good, I said simply. That's all I ask. Try. I stepped back, placed my hand on the edge of the door, and nodded. Now go. You have a move to figure out. And I have a life to reclaim. Tanya tugged at his arm. Reluctant but unwilling to make a scene, he let himself be led down the hall, turning once to glance back at me. His expression was a mix of hurt and something else, respect. Maybe, blooming too late. I closed the door gently. Not with anger, but with certainty. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the sweetest music I'd heard in years. Alone in my apartment, I leaned against the door, trembling, not from fear this time, but from power. For a long moment, Malik just stood there, his hand braced on the frame like he could hold the whole world steady if he pushed hard enough. I met his eyes and didn't blink. For years, I had been the one to look away, to soften first, to patch over tension with a smile or a casserole. But that morning, I refused to be the one who flinched. Finally, he dropped his hand, his shoulders sagging. Mama, please, don't shut me out. I know we've taken advantage. But you're all I've got. All you've got? I repeated softly. Malik, you have Tanya, your children, a new house, a new chapter. What you don't have anymore is an open account with my name on it. That's what's changing. Tanya stepped forward, her voice sugar-dipped but sharp underneath. Mrs. Carter, it's not fair to punish Malik like this. He's doing his best. I turned my gaze to her, steady as a judge. Fairness. Tanya is a woman working double shifts to put her son through college. Fairness is 25 years of saving pennies so he'd never have to beg strangers for help. Fairness is giving until there's nothing left. And still being told you're hard to live with. Don't talk to me about fair. She stiffened, her eyes flashing, but she didn't argue. Malik looked down at the floor like a schoolboy caught cheating. You said you loved me. I continued, my voice gentler now. If that's true, then love me enough to learn responsibility. Love me enough to stop asking and start standing on your own 2 feet. Because I won't carry you anymore. He rubbed his temples. Mama, I don't know how to do this without you. My heart ached at that confession. But I held firm. Then it's time you learned. I raised you to be capable. Malik, I didn't raise you to depend on me like a crutch forever. You're a man now. Be one. For a moment, silence filled the hallway. Even the hum of the refrigerator behind me seemed to pause. Malik finally lifted his gaze. Eyes red-rimmed. I'll try. Good, I said simply. That's all I ask. Try. I stepped back, placed my hand on the edge of the door, and nodded. Now go. You have a move to figure out. And I have a life to reclaim. Tanya tugged at his arm. Reluctant but unwilling to make a scene, he let himself be led down the hall, turning once to glance back at me. His expression was a mix of hurt and something else, respect. Maybe, blooming too late. I closed the door gently. Not with anger, but with certainty. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the sweetest music I'd heard in years. Alone in my apartment, I leaned against the door, trembling, not from fear this time, but from power, and I knew the next knock I answered would be on my terms. Not theirs. And I knew the next knock I answered would be on my terms. Not theirs. The quiet after they left was different from the silence I had known before. It wasn't the heavy quiet of loneliness, but the steady quiet of ownership. My apartment felt bigger, brighter, as if the walls themselves had taken a deep breath. I walked to the window, watching the late morning sun stretch across the street, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing out on life. I felt like I was finally stepping into it. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the table where the manila folder still sat. My fingers traced the outline of the will again. This time, instead of fear, I felt resolve. Malik would inherit something, yes, but on conditions that made sense, that he respect me, that he show up for me, that he prove he knew how to be a son, not just a collector of favors. If he failed, then every cent would go to the women's charities listed on page 3. I smiled at the thought. Either way, my money would finally do something meaningful. The phone rang again. I let it buzz until the voicemail clicked on. Malik's voice came through, softer than usual. Mama, I don't know what's happening to us. I know I messed up. But I don't want to lose you. Please, call me back. For a moment, my chest tightened. A mother's heart doesn't stop aching just because her son grows careless. But I didn't reach for the phone. Instead, I reached for my notebook and wrote down his message. Word for word, the way I had once written his promises. This time, though, I didn't circle the words. I underlined them twice, reminders that change takes more than tears. At 4 o'clock, my friend Marla arrived. She breezed in like a warm wind, her laughter filling the apartment. Girl, you look lighter, she said, dropping her purse on the chair. I feel lighter, I admitted. We walked to the park together. The air crisp, the trees bowing under late autumn gold. I hadn't taken a simple walk with a friend in years. It always felt like Malik's needs came first. Now, every step felt like a small rebellion. A declaration that my life was mine again. We sat beneath the big oak, its roots like old bones pressed against the earth. I told Marla everything, about the house, the money, the confrontation. She listened without judgment, her hand squeezing mine at just the right moments. You finally closed the bank, she said with a grin. About time. I laughed, loud and free, startling a few birds from the branches. As the sun slipped behind the trees, I realized something. My story wasn't ending because I had said no, it was just beginning. And for the first time in decades, I was the one writing it. That night, I returned home with a looseness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The apartment greeted me like an old friend, quiet, unassuming, mine. I set the kettle on and let the whistle fill the room while I slipped out of my shoes. On the counter, my notebook still lay open to the page where I'd written the Bank of Evelyn is closed. I underlined it twice, bold strokes that made the words look permanent. I poured my tea and sat by the window. From across the courtyard, the faint hum of a television drifted out of someone else's life. For once, I didn't feel jealous or left out. I felt anchored, as if I had just stepped into the center of my own story. At 9, the phone rang again. Malik. I let it buzz. Then another call. Tanya this time. I turned the ringer off and leaned back, savoring the silence like a favorite hymn. They could leave messages, I didn't owe them instant replies. I had spent too many years living on their deadlines. Instead, I opened the manila folder again and began reading the will line by line. Each sentence was a guardrail, keeping me from swerving back into old habits. The charities listed gave me a quiet thrill: women's shelters, scholarship programs, organizations that fought for women my age who had been discarded by their families. I thought of those women, faces I'd never meet, and felt less alone. Maybe my story could be part of something larger than betrayal and regret. I set the papers aside and picked up a book Marla had lent me months ago. Its spine still uncracked. I read 3 chapters before I realized I wasn't just filling time, I was enjoying myself. Small as it was, it felt like proof that joy could be rebuilt from scratch. At midnight, I turned off the lights, slid under the covers, and whispered to the darkness, "You did good today, Evelyn." It was the first compliment I'd given myself in years. Sleep came quickly, deep and without dreams. The next morning, I woke to sunlight splashing across my curtains. For once, my day wasn't dictated by anyone else's emergencies. I brewed my coffee, dressed carefully, and even dabbed on perfume, because why not? A woman doesn't need a reason to feel alive. When I checked my phone, I found 21 missed calls and 15 new texts. The last one, from Malik. Read, "Mama, if this is about the house, we can talk. Maybe we can figure something out. But please, help me with the movers first." There it was again, the bargaining chip. the dangling promise. After that, always after, I set the phone down. My decision already carved in stone. Today, I wasn't just going to ignore Malik's pleas, I was going to show him that his mother's life had shifted for good. And no amount of guilt could move it back. By mid-morning, I had already decided not to touch the phone. I placed it in the drawer with the old receipts and warranties, the same drawer where I'd hidden the house deed. It felt symbolic, tucking his frantic calls alongside the other papers that once dictated my worth. Instead of pacing, I dressed myself in the blue dress I hadn't worn in years. It wasn't fancy, just a simple cotton shift with pockets, but when I slipped it over my shoulders, I remembered the last time I wore it. Malik had teased me for trying too hard at a barbecue. And I'd stuffed it in the back of the closet ever since. Now it felt like armor. Soft but resolute. I left the apartment and walked to the corner bakery. The clerk, a kind young man with freckles, smiled as though he'd been waiting for me. Haven't seen you in a while. Miss Carter. Been busy, I said, surprising myself with a laugh. Busy reclaiming my life, though he didn't need to know. I ordered a croissant and coffee, then sat by the window to watch people bustle along the sidewalk. For once, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like part of the living city. By the time I returned home, my voicemail box was nearly full. Malik's voice dominated most of them, pleading, frustrated, sometimes angry. Tanya's were clipped, her tone carrying that edge of politeness sharpened into pressure. And then, near the end, Mika's voice cracked through, small and hesitant. Grandma, are you mad at us? Daddy says you're sick. I don't want you to be sick. That message pierced deeper than any of Malik's words. My grandson didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of his father's lies. I sat at the table, clutching the phone, fighting the old instinct to rush in, smooth things over, make it easier for everyone else. But I didn't press call back. Not yet. Children learn by watching. If I folded now, Malik would never change, and Micah would grow up thinking love meant endless sacrifice without respect. I stood, carried the phone back to the drawer, and shut it again. That afternoon, Marla called. How about dinner tonight? My treat. Your treat? I teased. Now there's a phrase I don't hear often. Exactly why you need to hear it. She replied. We met at a small soul food diner where the cornbread was sweet and the greens cooked down with smoked turkey. We laughed until tears rolled down our cheeks, swapping stories like teenagers. For a while, I forgot about wills and bank accounts. For a while, I was simply Evelyn, woman, friend, alive. When I got home later, the apartment glowed warmly around me, as if even the walls approved of my choices. I slipped into bed without checking the phone once. Tomorrow, Malik would try again. I could feel it, but this time, I was ready to answer him with something stronger than money, a mother's truth. The next morning, I rose early, the sky still gray with the hush of dawn. I brewed my coffee and sat with my notebook. Not to add more numbers this time, but to write something different. Rules. My rules. For 69 years, I had lived by everyone else's expectations. Today, I drafted the commandments of Evelyn Carter. I will not give what I cannot afford to lose. I will not confuse love with obligation. I will not allow myself to be treated as furniture, present, useful, but unseen. I will choose joy without guilt. I will never apologize for saying no. I underlined the last one twice, the ink pressing deep into the page. Right on cue, the phone began to buzz again. I let it ring out. Then a text came. Mama, I'm outside. Please let me in. I sighed, set down my pen, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, Malik stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, who'd been wrestling with something heavier than furniture. Tanya wasn't with him this time. I opened the door just wide enough to stand in the frame. Morning, I said, calm and even. Mama, I need to talk to you. He whispered, almost boyishly, not about money, about everything. That caught me off guard. I stepped back, gesturing toward the couch. He entered slowly, like a guest rather than an owner. Already a change. He sat with his hands clasped. I listened to all the messages I left you. And I sounded just like Dad used to. Always asking, always taking. You taught me better than that. I just didn't want to admit it. I folded my arms, waiting. He lifted his eyes to mine. I've been selfish, Mama. You gave me everything, and I treated you like a bill to be paid or ignored. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, fragile but real. My chest tightened, part ache, part relief. I nodded, apology accepted. But Malik, understand this, sorry doesn't refill the well. Trust is built with actions, not promises. He nodded quickly. I know, I want to do better. For you, for my kids. I don't want Micah growing up thinking it's normal to treat you like that. I studied him carefully. He looked smaller than I remembered. Humbled. Maybe it was a beginning. Or maybe it was just another performance. Time would tell. I leaned back in my chair. We'll see. Malik, respect is a language you'll have to practice. And I'll be watching closely. His shoulders sagged, but not in defeat, more like acceptance. I understand, Mama. Thank you for giving me a chance to try. As he left, I realized something powerful. Whether Malik changed or not, I had already won, because I had finally changed myself. When the door closed behind Malik, I stayed seated, staring at the empty cushion where he'd just been. The apartment felt strangely balanced, as if my walls were holding their breath with me. For years, I had begged for scraps of respect, waited for gestures that never came, and filled the silence with excuses. But now, the silence was different. It was mine. And it carried the echo of boundaries finally spoken out loud. I made another cup of tea and returned to my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote, respect is not requested, it is required. I underlined it 3 times. The rest of the morning, I let myself do something I hadn't done in decades, nothing. I sat by the window, watched the neighborhood wake up, listened to the laughter of schoolchildren and the bark of a neighbor's dog. No rushing, no obligations, just presence. It felt like a luxury vacation, one paid not with money but with courage. By noon, Marla called. Lunch? There's a new place on Auburn Avenue. I hesitated, then smiled. Why not? We met at a small cafe painted bright yellow, the smell of collard greens and fried catfish spilling out before we even walked in. Over bowls of gumbo, I told her about Malik's visit, his apology, his promises. She listened, tilting her head the way she always did when measuring truth. Do you believe him? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted, but for the first time, I don't feel desperate to believe. That's the difference. She grinned. That's growth. Girl, you've been feeding everyone else for so long, you forgot to feed yourself. Her words hit me deeper than I expected. I realized how much of my identity had been tied to being the giver, the rescuer, the safety net. Without those roles, who was I? The thought scared me, but also thrilled me. Maybe I was about to find out. After lunch, I walked home slowly, savoring the crisp air and the rhythm of my own steps. I didn't even check my phone until I was back inside. More messages from Malik, fewer this time, and softer. Mama, can we have dinner together soon? Just you, me, and the kids. The invitation tugged at me, but I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I finally understood I had the right to respond on my terms. I set the phone aside, drew a long breath, and felt the solid ground under my feet. Tomorrow, I would decide whether to take that dinner invitation, but for tonight, Evelyn Carter belonged to no one's schedule but her own. That evening, I lit a candle on my kitchen table. Not for romance, not for prayer, just for me. The soft glow painted the walls in amber. And for the first time, this little apartment looked less like a stopgap and more like a sanctuary. I poured myself a glass of wine, cheap, but good enough, and sat down with a novel I had started months ago and abandoned on page 37. The words seemed sharper now, as though even fiction respected me more once I began respecting myself. Still, Malik's text pulsed in the back of my mind. Dinner with the kids. A part of me ached for that. Mika's grin. Little Ava's giggle. The way they used to crawl into my lap and beg for stories. But another part of me bristled. Was this Malik's attempt at repairing the rift? Or just another strategy to ease me back into his control? I couldn't tell yet. I set the book down and reached for my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote 2 columns. Reasons to go and reasons to wait. Under go, see the grandchildren. Test if Malik is serious. Reclaim a seat at the table. Under wait, avoid rushing forgiveness. Ensure his apology isn't another transaction. Protect my peace. Both lists grew evenly, but my gut leaned toward waiting. Love demanded patience, so did boundaries. The phone buzzed again, this time. A voicemail from Tanya. I pressed play. Her voice was polite. Too polite. Like sugar hiding vinegar. Mrs. Carter, I think it would be good for the children to see you soon. They miss you. We all do. Let's put this unpleasantness behind us. Unpleasantness. As if betrayal could be swept under a rug like spilled salt. I deleted the message without replying. I carried my glass to the balcony. Stepping out into the cool night. The city hummed below, cars. Laughter. A siren in the distance. For years, I had shrunk myself to fit Malik's needs. Now I realized the world outside was still moving. Still alive, waiting for me to rejoin it. I raised my glass to the stars. To Evelyn Carter, I whispered, finally on her own terms. Tomorrow, I would decide whether to open my door to family again, but tonight. I opened it only to myself. And the freedom tasted better than any feast. The morning came crisp. The kind of October chill that sneaks through the window frame and brushes your ankles like a cat. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and brewed my coffee strong enough to wake an army. The phone sat silent on the table, face down, as if it knew it had lost its power over me. I returned to my notebook. The page with my 2 lists staring back at me. Go, wait, the columns hadn't changed overnight. But I had. Last night's candlelight had given me clarity. I didn't owe anyone an answer right away. Malik could stew in his silence the way I had stewed in mine for years. That, I realized, was part of his lesson. I filled the sink with warm water, dropped in a handful of dishes, and laughed softly at myself. Boundaries and bubbles, I thought. That's today's theme. By late morning, Marla called. Girl, you sound lighter every day. What's your secret? Simple, I said. I stopped financing my own heartbreak. She cackled. Put that on a t-shirt. We talked about everything from grocery prices to church gossip. Not once did I mention Malik's invitation. Not because I was hiding it, but because, for the first time, it didn't feel urgent. After lunch, I took a walk downtown. Atlanta was buzzing. Vendors on the corners, kids playing tag on the sidewalks. I passed a boutique and caught my reflection in the glass. My posture was straighter, my face softer, as if shedding years of weight I didn't realize I carried. For a moment, I didn't see a mother scorned or a woman discarded. I saw Evelyn Carter, reader, walker, friend, woman with her own bank account and her own spine. When I got home, a new message blinked on the machine. Malik's voice again, gentler this time. Mama, the kids really want to see you. Ava asked if Grandma doesn't love her anymore. Please, come to dinner Friday. No strings attached. That one cut deeper. No strings attached. Could it be true? Or was it just another version of after that? I sat in my chair, closed my eyes, and let the question roll around. For once, I didn't rush the answer. Love, I decided, deserved deliberation just as much as money did. Friday was still days away, and I knew one thing: if I went, it would be because I chose to, not because guilt dragged me there. And that made all the difference. Friday crept closer like a shadow stretching across the floor. But I refused to let it corner me. Each day I built new habits that belonged to me alone. Wednesday morning, I strolled to the library, picked out a stack of novels, and registered for a free lecture on women's financial independence. Thursday, I bought myself a pair of sensible shoes on sale, but chosen with joy, not guilt. Every small act felt like I was stacking bricks for the foundation of a new house. One no deed could take away. Still, Malik's words echoed in quiet moments. Ava asked if Grandma doesn't love her anymore. That pierced deeper than I wanted to admit. Children don't understand grown-up betrayals, they only understand presence or absence. And I wanted to be present. But I also knew that rushing back into old patterns would teach them the wrong lesson, that Grandma's love came with no boundaries. No dignity. Friday arrived with clear skies. A little too bright for the weight in my chest. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote, dinner? Yes or no? I tapped my pen, weighing the question like a judge with the gavel in hand. At 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. Malik's voice trembled in the voicemail. Mama, we're setting the table. The kids are asking about you. Please, even if just for them. Come tonight. I stood, walked to the mirror in the hallway, and studied my reflection. The woman looking back at me was not the same Evelyn who had given away $48,000 without blinking. This woman had boundaries etched in her bones. I whispered to her, if you go as an equal, not as a servant. If they can't respect that, you walk out. At 6:30, I slipped on my new shoes, grabbed my shawl, and headed toward the door. My heart beat faster with every step down the hall. But it wasn't fear, it was resolve. I didn't know what awaited me at Malik's dinner table. But I knew one thing with certainty. Evelyn Carter would no longer be anyone's afterthought. Tonight, they would either make space for me, or watch me walk away for good. The drive to Malik's neighborhood was short, but every mile carried the weight of years. As I turned onto his street, the houses all looked the same: trimmed lawns, fresh paint, neat driveways, cookie-cutter dreams paid for with sweat and signatures. But the house at the corner, the one with the pale shutters and wide porch, was the one that carried my money in its bones. My chest tightened as I parked. Through the living room window, I saw light glowing warm against the curtains. Children's shadows danced across the walls, their laughter faint but clear. For a moment, my resolve wavered. That laughter was my heartbeat. It was what had kept me going through night shifts and double shifts and every sacrifice I had made. I walked up the path, my new shoes clicking steady against the pavement. When Malik opened the door, his eyes widened with relief. Mama, he said softly, almost reverently, like he wasn't sure I would really come. Tanya appeared behind him, her smile polite but taut, like a hostess playing her part. Inside, the dining table was set, plates neatly arranged, glasses filled with water. Ava ran toward me first, her tiny arms wrapping around my waist. Grandma, I knew you'd come. Micah followed, hugging me tighter than he had in years. My throat thickened, but I held my tears back. I wasn't here to cry, I was here to stand. We sat at the table. The food looked fine, but I noticed immediately, there was no seat saved for me at the head. Tanya sat there, Malik at the other end. I was placed on the side, squeezed between the children. I swallowed the sting and straightened my back. Position at the table doesn't define position in life, I reminded myself. Dinner began with small talk, the kids chattering about school projects and soccer practice. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Malik cleared his throat. Mama, I want to thank you for coming tonight. I know things have been tense. Tanya chimed in quickly. We just want to put the unpleasantness behind us. I set down my fork slowly. Unpleasantness? Is that what we're calling betrayal now? The air went cold. Malik glanced at Tanya, then back at me. Mama, please, not in front of the kids. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. Then maybe you shouldn't have treated me like furniture in front of them either. Tanya's smile cracked, Malik's face paled, and the children went quiet, because for the first time in that house, I wasn't a guest. I was a voice that demanded to be heard. The silence stretched across the table like an extra guest nobody invited. Ava glanced at me with wide eyes, her little fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Micah set his down gently, watching his father the way a boy studies weather, trying to guess if it will storm. Malik cleared his throat. Mama, that's not what we meant. We were just trying to make things easier. Easier for who? I asked, my tone even. For Tanya's mother to have the room with the garden view? For you to live without the burden of considering me? Easier doesn't mean better, Malik. Sometimes easier just means selfish. Tanya stiffened, her hands folded too tightly in her lap. Mrs. Carter, she said, her voice sugar with a steel edge. This house is supposed to be a place of peace. We thought you'd be more comfortable in your own apartment. I smiled faintly. Comfortable is what people say when they've already decided you're unnecessary. Her mouth snapped shut. Malik rubbed his forehead, looking smaller than he ever had across a table I partly paid for. Mama, I was wrong. I know that now. The kids need you. I need you. I just didn't realize it until you stopped answering. I let the words sink in, but I didn't rush to fill the silence. I'd learned that pause was power. Finally, I said, what you need to realize is this. You can't build your life on my sacrifices and then lock me out when the house is finished. Family doesn't work that way. Micah whispered, "Grandma, are you mad at Daddy?" I turned to him, my heart softening. "No, baby, I'm not mad. I'm just teaching him something he should have learned a long time ago, that love and respect have to walk together." Ava leaned her head against my arm, her tiny gesture louder than any apology. Malik's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, give me a chance to make this right. Let me prove to you that I can be better." I nodded slowly. "Prove it with actions, not promises. Starting now." Tanya shifted uncomfortably. Malik bowed his head, and the children leaned closer to me, as if they already knew a new order was forming at that table. One where Evelyn Carter finally had a voice. Dinner carried on, but the food might as well have been cardboard. Every bite felt thick with unsaid words. Tanya pushed peas around her plate. Malik kept his eyes down, and the children clung to my presence like it was the only safe island in the room. When the meal ended, Ava tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, can you tell us a story before you go?" I smiled, brushing her curls back. "Of course, baby." I settled into the couch, Micah and Ava curling against me, their warmth like a balm. I began telling them about the day Malik was born, how small he was, how loud he cried, how I thought the world had handed me the most precious gift in existence. As I spoke, Malik stood in the doorway, listening with glassy eyes. For the first time in years, he seemed to see himself through my sacrifices. Tanya sat stiffly in an armchair, her arms crossed, her lips tight. She didn't like it, the attention pulled away from her and back toward me, but I didn't care. When the story ended, Ava clapped, and Micah whispered, "Daddy, Grandma makes everything sound like magic." Malik swallowed hard, his jaw working. "She always did," he admitted. That small acknowledgement, though fragile, was a seed. I didn't smile at him, but I didn't dismiss it either. Seeds needed time, water, and care to grow, and this one would have to be nurtured by his actions, not my forgiveness. I rose, kissed both children on their foreheads, and picked up my shawl. "I'll come again," I promised softly, "but remember, Grandma comes as a guest, not as a ghost. I want to be seen, not just used." The children nodded solemnly, as though I'd entrusted them with a sacred oath. At the door, Malik caught my arm. His voice trembled. "Mama, thank you for coming. I know I've got a lot to fix. Please, don't give up on me." I met his eyes. "Steady. I won't give up on you, Malik, but I won't give in, either." With that, I stepped into the cool night air, the weight of my own words keeping me upright. As I walked down the path from the house my money built, I realized something profound. Whether Malik truly changed or not, I had already changed, and that meant I could never be erased from my own story again. The night air wrapped around me like a shawl as I walked to my car. I paused once, looking back at the house. Through the window, I could see Tanya clearing the plates with tight movements, Malik standing still as if weighed down by something heavier than the mortgage. The children peeked from behind the curtain, waving at me with small, hopeful hands. I waved back, my chest aching with love, but this time, love didn't come mixed with desperation. Driving home, I thought about all the years I had given Malik everything he asked for: money, time, forgiveness, and how little he had ever given back. Tonight felt like a turning point, not because he had promised to change, but because I had finally drawn a line he couldn't cross. That line wasn't built on anger, it was built on respect. Back in my apartment, I set down my purse and slipped off my shoes. The quiet welcomed me. It wasn't empty anymore, it was full, brimming with choices that belonged only to me. I lit another candle on the table, poured myself a small glass of wine, and opened the folder from Attorney Sinclair. My eyes scanned the draft will again. The words gave me strength. This was my legacy, not just for Malik but for every woman who needed proof that dignity was worth protecting. The phone buzzed once more. Malik again. I didn't answer. A moment later, a text arrived. "Mama, I don't know how to fix this yet, but I will. I love you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone down without replying. He would learn that love wasn't measured by how quickly I answered. It was measured by whether his actions matched his words. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote a final line for the day. "I am not a burden. I am a woman with worth." I closed the cover with a decisive snap and felt the words settle into my bones like gospel. As I slid beneath the covers, I knew the next chapter of my life was no longer about waiting for Malik to see me, it was about me refusing to disappear. No matter who tried to erase me. The weekend passed quietly, almost sweetly. On Saturday, I cleaned the apartment top to bottom. Not out of duty, but because I wanted to. The windows gleamed, the floors shone, and when I finally sat down with a cup of tea, the place felt new. It struck me that I hadn't felt pride in my own space for years. I had always thought of it as temporary, a holding cell until Malik made room for me. Now I realized, this was my home, my sanctuary, and it deserved to be loved as much as any house with a mortgage. On Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months. Marla met me at the doors, fanning herself dramatically as if she'd just seen a miracle. "Look who finally decided to stop hiding," she teased. I laughed, hugged her, and slid into the pew beside her. The choir lifted their voices, and I let the sound wash over me. For the first time, I didn't bow my head to beg for Malik to change. I prayed for myself, for strength, for courage to keep walking the new road I'd chosen. After the service, a few women gathered around me, asking where I'd been. I kept my answers simple, but one older lady touched my hand gently and said, "Honey, sometimes absence is the loudest sermon." That stayed with me all afternoon. By evening, Malik's messages had slowed. Instead of frantic calls, he sent short texts. "Thinking of you. Kids asked about you again. Hope you're okay." It wasn't much, but it was different. There was no request attached. No urgent demand. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to learn. I didn't reply. Not yet. I wanted to see if his patience could stretch further than a single day. That night, I cooked myself a proper meal: roast chicken, potatoes, green beans with garlic. I set the table for one, lit a candle, and poured a glass of wine. Eating alone no longer felt like punishment. It felt like celebration. As I savored the meal, a thought struck me with the force of revelation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to include me, I had already included myself. Monday morning, the phone was quiet, too quiet. For a moment I wondered if Malik had finally given up. But then I reminded myself, that was his choice to make. Mine had already been made. I slipped on my shawl, grabbed my purse, and headed to the bank for a follow-up with Miss Anderson. She greeted me with a professional smile that softened when she recognized me. "Miss Carter, back so soon?" I promised myself I'd be thorough. I replied, sliding into the chair across from her desk. We reviewed my accounts, the new savings, and the transfer to the charities I'd chosen. Everything was in order. When she handed me the updated documents, I felt like I was holding a shield in my hands. This paper, unlike the house deed, told the truth about who I was and what I valued. "Is there anything else?" she asked. I thought for a moment. Then I shook my head. "No, I finally feel like I have enough." On the walk home, the autumn air smelled of leaves and fresh bread from a bakery on the corner. I stopped, bought myself a warm roll, and ate it right there on the sidewalk. Nobody watching, nobody judging, just me, enjoying a simple pleasure I'd denied myself for too long. Back at my apartment, a letter waited in the mailbox. My name was scrawled across the envelope in Malik's handwriting. Inside was a short note. "Dear Mama, I know I've failed you. I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking anyway. Please don't shut me out. The kids need you. I need you. I'm learning. I swear I'm learning. Love, Malik." I sat at the table, reading it twice, 3 times. His words were raw, almost childlike. For the first time, he wasn't asking for money. He was asking for me. I folded the note carefully, placed it inside my notebook, and whispered, "We'll see. Tomorrow, I would decide whether to answer Malik's plea, but tonight, I rested in the knowledge that my life was no longer written in his handwriting, it was written in mine. That night I dreamed of my mother. She was standing in her old garden, the one she used to keep behind our tiny house when I was a girl. Her hands were covered in dirt, her apron tied crooked, and she looked at me with those sharp, loving eyes. "Evelyn," she said in the dream, "you can't grow anything if you keep planting in other people's soil. Find your own ground." I woke before dawn, her words lingering like perfume. For years, I had been planting in Malik's soil my money, my time, my faith, and every time I hoped for flowers, I got weeds. Now, finally, I had started tending my own ground. After breakfast, I took out Malik's letter again. I read it slowly, tracing the ink with my finger. It was more vulnerable than anything he had said in person. But vulnerability didn't erase history. I knew better than to confuse one apology with a full harvest. Still, something inside me softened, not enough to forgive blindly, but enough to consider opening the door, just a little. I picked up my pen and wrote a reply on a clean sheet of stationery. Malik, I received your letter. I can see that you are trying. And that matters. But understand this. Trying must become doing. I will not go back to being your safety net. I will only be your mother. Which means I will give love, not money. If you can respect that, then we can move forward. If not, we will stay right where we are. The choice is yours. Love, Mama. I sealed the envelope, walked to the corner mailbox, and dropped it in. The clang of the metal door shutting felt final, decisive. The message was no longer in my hands, it was in his. When I returned home, I called Marla. I think I just planted my first seed in my own soil. I told her. She laughed warmly. And about time. Can't wait to see what grows. As I hung up the phone, I realized this was the first season in decades where I was tending to myself, and I wondered what kind of garden might bloom from that choice. The next 2 days stretched long and quiet. I half expected Malik to show up at my door again, pounding like he always did when he wanted something. But instead, there was silence. A new kind of silence, not the heavy one that used to make me feel forgotten. But a patient quiet, as if the world were waiting to see what Malik would do with my letter. On Wednesday afternoon, I went to the park with Marla. We sat under the big oak tree, sipping coffee from paper cups and watching the children chase each other across the grass. I told her about the letter I had written. You finally spoke plain, she said, nodding. You didn't yell, you didn't beg, you just told the truth. That's power. Her words settled deep in me. For years, I thought power meant sacrifice. Now I understood. Power was clarity. That evening, when I returned home, I found another envelope slipped under my door. My heart skipped, knowing whose handwriting it would be. I opened it carefully. Dear Mama, thank you for answering me. I understand what you said. I won't ask you for money again. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. But I want to prove to you, with actions, that I can change. Could you give me a chance to show you? Maybe dinner again. This time just me and the kids. Tanya can sit this one out. I think we need space to heal. Love, Malik. I sank into my chair, reading the note twice. For once, no demands, no deadlines, no numbers, just a request for time. A chance. I folded the paper, placed it in my notebook alongside the first letter, and sat in the hush of my little apartment. The tears that came were not the bitter kind. They were soft, releasing years of weight I hadn't realized I still carried. Tomorrow, I would decide whether to accept Malik's invitation, but tonight, I savored the rarest gift he had given me so far, respect wrapped in patience. Thursday morning, the sun slipped through my blinds in soft gold stripes. I sat at the table with my coffee. Malik's second letter spread open before me. His words looked different from the pleas and excuses of the past. They didn't press urgency on me, they waited. Patient, like an open hand instead of a clenched fist. I thought of Ava and Micah, their small arms around me, their questions heavy with confusion. They deserved to know a grandmother's love, not just the fallout of their parents' mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, Malik was beginning to understand that love couldn't be bought or borrowed. Still, I knew one dinner wouldn't fix years of imbalance. This time, I had to walk in with boundaries stitched into my very skin. I reached for my notebook and wrote, if I go, I will not discuss money. I will not let guilt steer the conversation. I will remind Malik of my expectations, consistency, respect, honesty. I will enjoy my grandchildren without apology. I closed the notebook with a firm snap. This wasn't weakness, it was strategy. That afternoon, I phoned Malik. He answered on the first ring, his voice trembling with relief. Mama? Yes, Malik, I said evenly. I'll come to dinner tomorrow. Just you and the kids. No negotiations. No surprises. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, I promise. Just us. When I hung up, I felt a mixture of fear and calm. Fear, because old wounds could so easily reopen. Calm, because this time, I was stepping into that house not as a forgotten piece of furniture, but as a woman who knew her worth. Marla came by in the evening with a slice of peach cobbler wrapped in foil. We ate it together at my table, laughing like schoolgirls. When I told her about the dinner, she nodded firmly. Go, but go as Evelyn, not as Malik's bank. You hear me? I hear you, I promised. Tomorrow night, I would walk once more into the house my money built, but this time, I'd bring something stronger than cash or sacrifice. I'd bring Evelyn Carter, whole and unshakable. Friday evening arrived with a sky the color of faded denim, streaks of pink trailing the horizon like brushstrokes. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my shawl, my pulse steady. For years, I had walked into Malik's life as though I were begging for a seat at his table. Tonight, I would walk in standing tall. The drive was quiet, my hands loose on the steering wheel. When I pulled up in front of the house, I noticed something small but meaningful. The porch light was on. As if they were waiting, not just assuming. Malik opened the door, his children tumbling out before him. Ava squealed, clinging to my legs. Micah hugged me tight, whispering, I'm glad you came, Grandma. Their joy was unfiltered, pure. I kissed their foreheads and stepped inside. The table was simple this time. No Tanya, no fancy dishes, just spaghetti and garlic bread, the way Malik used to beg for when he was a boy. We sat together, the kids chatting, Malik quiet but attentive. He asked about my week. He listened. He didn't once mention money. After dinner, we played a board game the children had set up in the living room. I laughed so hard at Ava's theatrics that my sides ached. Malik watched me, his eyes softer than I'd seen in years. When the kids finally drifted off to bed, he lingered by the doorway, fidgeting. Mama, he said quietly, I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I'm going to earn back your trust. Not with promises, with actions. I don't want my kids to grow up thinking love means using people. I studied him. His words weren't perfect, but they were a start. And for once, I believed they might actually mean something. I stood, placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Good, because this is the last chance. Malik, not the last chance to get my money, the last chance to be my son. His eyes filled, and he nodded. When I left that night, the air was crisp, the stars scattered wide. I felt lighter than I had in decades. Not because Malik had changed yet, but because I had drawn the line. I had kept it, and I had found my own ground to stand on. Driving home, I realized the lesson was simple but eternal. Love without respect is exploitation. And sacrifice without boundaries is self-erasure. A mother's greatest gift isn't money, it's teaching her children how to stand without leaning forever. And for the first time in years, I knew I had finally taught Malik the most important lesson of all. Sometimes love disguises itself as endless giving, but real love has boundaries. A parent's sacrifices should build respect, not entitlement. Evelyn's story reminds us that saying no is not rejection, it's self-respect. And when you honor your own worth, you teach others how to honor you too. True strength isn't found in how much you give away. It's found in knowing when to stop giving and finally start living.